Hello, good afternoon everyone. Thank you for being here. I'll be presenting this project that's very much still in progress. It's a project led by Eva in collaboration with me. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Iceland, Indridason at UC Riverside, and Olafur Hardarson, a professor of political science at the University of Iceland. The main research question we are tackling in this project is why were the two political parties widely perceived as responsible for the economic crisis in Iceland in 2009, the culprits, why were they re-elected into government in the spring of 2013? So we had elections in last April. Those two parties are the Independence Party, abbreviated to IP, and the Progressive Party, that I'm not going to abbreviate to PP, or I will lose face throughout this talk, so I'll call them the Progressives. A little bit on the political context in Iceland, as the people here are probably aware of. The Icelandic banking system collapsed with bravura in October of 2009. There were both global and local reasons for this. The global reasons I don't need to tell you about. The local reasons are enormous growth of the banks, way beyond what the Icelandic economy could really sustain in times of crisis. And of course, that expansion was not within Iceland, but in Europe. Following the collapse of the banking system, there was naturally an economic crisis for the entire Icelandic economy. Serious enough so that Iceland entered in an agreement with IMF for an IMF bailout, which is actually now, what do you call the agreement or whatever, is over, that is successfully over, but was by most measures considered a successful bailout and not a very controversial issue among the Icelandic voters or in the political context in general. Immediately following the economic crisis was political turmoil, primarily symbolized by the pots and pans protest, by far the largest collective action in Icelandic political history. The public demanded political responsibility, resignation of the government. And of course, as to be expected, political trust went down. For example, in the parliament, it went down from 42% in February of 2008 to what is still the current level of about 15% of people saying they have high trust in the parliament. The pots and pans protesters were successful in the sense that in February of 2009, the government of the Independence Party and the Progressives resigned, and a new temporary left-wing government of the Social Democratic Alliance and the left-green movement, Left Greens, took office. As a result, we had early elections in April of 2009, in which the left-green movement and the Social Democrats won a very large victory. The center-right, the Independence Party and the Progressives were widely perceived by the public, and we have data on this, as bearing the main political responsibility for the collapse. And they suffered a great defeat. Just though to keep the record straight, people primarily blame the banks for the crisis in Iceland, followed by the Financial Supervisory Authority and the Central Bank, and then followed by the political parties. But of the political parties, it's without doubt the IP and the Progressives. The Independence Party is it's a center right-wing party, traditionally the largest party in Iceland, had been continuously in government since 1991. What awaited the new government in 2009 was not all roses. Their primary political task was to stabilize the economy, of course, by getting inflation down and unemployment. And, of course, to get foreign debt and currency issues under control. And thirdly, to minimize the blow for ordinary Icelanders. And that includes, among other things, mortgages. Mortgages in Iceland are indexed to inflation, and inflation went up tremendously, and of course, and also a lot of people had mortgages in foreign currencies. And as the Icelandic currency lost more than half of its value, mortgages became a very heavy burden for most Icelandic homeowners. And of course, as a left-wing government would always do, they wanted to minimize cuts to welfare, health, education, etc. as possible. But another issue that dominated the political discourse throughout that term was the so-called Icesave issue. The Icelandic banks had established deposit schemes or deposit accounts in Europe, primarily Britain and the Netherlands. So when the banks went under, the authorities in Britain and Netherlands took it upon themselves to pay out the insurance, deposit insurance to those people. And later, the Icelandic government refused to pay those, and a diplomatic conflict ensued. 3 times the Icelandic government negotiated a deal about how to repay those insurances, and 3 times those were rejected by the Icelanders, once by the parliament and in 2 national referendums. And it cannot be overstated how much this Icesave issue dominated the political discourse in Iceland during those 4 years. And eventually that case was sent to the EFTA court, and which ruled in favor of Iceland in January of 2013. A huge issue for Iceland and its recovery. So, how did the government do on that? Well, here we see the orange line show when the new government took office, about February, early spring 2009. And we can see that unemployment went down and inflation went down. So by that standard, they were doing okay. But here we have voters' perception of the economy related to household cost. The light gray boxes, arrears on mortgage or rent payments. Have you defaulted on your payments within the last 12 months? And so it's a slightly more objective measure, one can say, about how people are doing economically. But then they're also asked, how heavy of a burden is it to run your house, or just the whole household cost? And we can see, although arrears have reached kind of crisis, or are similar levels as they were in 2004, the perception that running a house is a heavy burden has continued to grow. So people really say they're feeling the strain of this. About 20% of the economic crisis. Elections in 2013, what happened? Combined, the Social Democrats and the Left Greens suffered the largest loss of any government in Icelandic history. We had a record number of new parties running. We had 11 new parties, but they did not necessarily succeed. They didn't dramatically change the landscape. 2 of those parties managed to get representatives voted past the 5% mark. The Independence Party gained 3 percentage points from last election, but keep in mind that's their biggest loss in history. But the Progressives are the undisputed winner of the election. They gained a little more than 10 points. A party that was almost, as you can see, the second kind of set of columns, the Progressives, they received 12% of the vote in 2007, 15 in 2009, and jumped up to 24, their largest victory in decades. And just to sum up the loss of the government, you can see it's from 1931 to 2013, and as you can see, it clearly stands out how much the government lost in the last elections. So I guess I turn the table to Eva.
Okay, so we, of course, started with the question, what explains the results of 2013? And when we started working on this paper this fall, we started to think, we were thinking about economic voting. And we can, well, the government that was doing, it was doing okay regarding the economy for the last 4 years. It still lost heavily. So economic voting doesn't really help us to understand why, because the economy had improved, or at least it hadn't gotten much more worse. So instead of making this a paper on economic voting, it's a paper about the economy and the vote. And of course, like Louis Beck has pointed out and many others, that the economic crisis had put economic issues on the agenda. We theorize that the economy as a context structures voters' evaluation of the performance of parties, both retrospectively and prospectively. So that's what I'm saying here. The crisis does not directly influence the vote, rather it puts certain issues on the agenda as a reaction to the crisis, and those are economic issues. And again, evaluations of past and prospective performance are grounded on the issues on the agenda during the election. And in the 2013 elections, those were the mortgage payments or payers, the ISAF, and the EU membership. EU membership was put on the agenda as a reaction to the recession. So the government thought that the Iceland would be better off within the EU than outside, and started to negotiate with the EU. Here is a picture of the ruling of the EFTA court in ISAF that Hulda was talking about. And the orange line is the support for the Progressive Party. And the ruling of the EFTA court was at the end of January this year. And you can see that at the beginning of January, or the support for the Progressive Party in January was 14.2%, but in February, after the EFTA ruling, the support was up to 22%. And out of the 5 parties who were in parliament in the last term, the Progressive Party was the only party who took stance against all 3 agreements that the Icelandic government did with the UK, with the authorities in the UK and the Netherlands. So what we suggest is that they gain credibility on this, because they had always been against, and their opponent said that they were not realistic. They always wanted to go to the courts. They said, we want the EFTA to rule on this, and we will gain from that. So what happens when the EFTA rules in the favor of the Icelandic state? The Progressive Party gains support. So about the context, what was the, so now I'm going into the data. This is just to show you that the economy was regarded as the most important issue in 2013. These are preliminary results, but 64% named the economy or financial issues. Trailing far behind was the EU, 10% named the EU, and I would suggest that part of that is also economic considerations, because those who are pro-EU, they want to go in there because they want the euro, because they think the euro is better than the Icelandic krona. So the data we are using is from the Icelandic National Election Study. The response rate was about 60%, and if you want to take a look at the Icelandic National Election Study, we have the website here. What we did is, or the variables we include at this time point, is prospective evaluation of parties' performance, retrospective evaluation of parties' performance. Then we ask about performance, especially about the party's performance regarding ISAF. And then we have the issues, what should be done for mortgage payers, the EU, and then this is the economy better, worse, or the same. And we adjust for party identification, left-right distance between parties and voters, and then demographic variables. Just a little bit of descriptives. So we ask we asked respondents to rate the party's general past performance in the past term. And as you can see, there's not a lot there's not a lot of difference. The incoming government or the incoming government parties, the Progressive Party and the Independence Party, they are rated, similar as the government, the outgoing government. We say that. So there's not a lot of difference here. So people in general didn't think that the government that was from the left government from 2009 to 2013, that they were in general doing bad. But when we ask about the performance regarding the Icesave issue, we see that the Progressive Party, around 75% say that they did good or very good. And we can also see that the left government, the SDA and the left Green, that there were around 36% who said that they did very bad. Well, what we did was we did a conditional logic, and I'm not going to stop here on this slide here, but we did a conditional logic where we include the performance, retrospective and prospective, and then we have the issue and the background. What I want to show you is I want to show you some pictures because they are nicer to look at. So here we have the marginal effects of parties' competence. So this would be prospective voting, and this is based on what is the most important issue and what party is the best one to deal with that issue or that task. And the Progressive Party and the Independence Party, you can see that for those two parties, parties' competence matters a lot more compared to the other four parties who were elected into the government. Party competence matter for all of the parties, but it matters more for the winners of the election. Then the marginal effect of parties' general past performance. We also see that, yes, it does matter for the vote. The first four parties are what we call the established parties. The last two, the BF and the Pirates, are the new parties. So there's no surprise there that there's no retrospective voting there because they were not even presented in the parliament. We also see that voters' perception of parties' general past performance matters more for the winners of the election compared to the old government. And then we have the Icesave, and we see the pattern here is that parties' performance in Icesave does matter for the winners of the election. It doesn't have effect on the vote for any of the other parties. And then here on this picture, I only want to draw your attention to the EU issue. So here we have the four established parties. The first one, Social Democratic Alliance, is the one who is the most pro-EU and has been leading in that we should apply and the negotiations that started last term. And you can see here that yes, definitely the voters of the Social Democratic Alliance, they are more pro-EU. And also the, can I see here? Yeah, also the, this and this. These are the two former government parties. They are both more pro-EU, and this is both whether we should continue the negotiation and whether we should enter. So this is combined. And the old opposition parties, they are anti-EU. So we see also a clear pattern here between the opposition and the former, the new opposition, new government. So conclusion, the economy placed issues on the agenda, and those issues, structures, voters' retrospective and prospective evaluations of parties' performance. And we also suggest and want to explore more is whether the gain of the like the Icesave issue, the credibility that the Progressive Party gained on this issue, the credibility spilled over to their electoral promises about how to deal with mortgage payments, and what we would like to call populist electoral promises, in the sense that populist in the sense that they it was well, maybe we could call them unrealistic, but anyway, so we're trying to examine how the credibility they gain on one issue spills over to another one, and also the worries, financial worries, the voters experience. Maybe that also opened up a fertile ground for those promises. So people think, well, they did this right, so maybe they can do this as well. So, thank you.